You have no right to be here, old man, my daughter's mother-in-law, Deborah, hissed at me. This is my son's house now. Emily is the owner. I just stood in the living room I built with my own 2 hands. I looked at my daughter, who was weeping in the corner. I looked at the trash they had spread everywhere. Actually, I said, you're trespassing. 5 minutes later, as they were escorted off the property, I only had 3 words left for them. Get out now. Before I tell you how I found out my daughter was a prisoner in the very home I gave her, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. My name is William Anderson, but everyone just calls me Bill. I am 70 years old. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe that family is something you fight for. I gripped the steering wheel of my F-150. The leather on it was worn smooth, shiny after 20 years, but my calloused palms still felt every crack. I've spent 50 years as a contractor pouring foundations and framing houses all over Chicago. I learned a long time ago that wood, steel, and concrete always tell the truth. People don't. This truck and the toolbox on the passenger seat were the only things I really trusted anymore. That toolbox was my life. Saws, drills, levels, tools that built things, tools that fixed what was broken. In the truck bed, a young Meyer lemon tree, its root ball wrapped carefully in burlap, rattled slightly every time I hit a bump on Interstate 55. It was a gift, a symbol. My late wife Sarah had always wanted a lemon tree. She passed 2 years ago, and the memory of her is still a cold, empty hole in my chest every morning. I was 3 hours south of the city, heading to the country house near the Illinois River. This wasn't a social call. This was an inspection. My daughter Emily, my only kid, was living there. I had finalized the paperwork last week. I told her the house was a gift, a fresh start. But deep down I knew it was meant to be an escape from her husband Jason. I, unlike Sarah, never trusted that punk. He has the smile of a politician and the ethics of a weasel. He calls himself a real estate developer. But for the 5 years he's been married to my girl, the only thing he's developed are credit card debts and a beer gut. He was living off Emily, off her sweetness, off her endless patience, and it was driving me insane. Sarah saw right through him. He's a bad shim in a load-bearing wall, Bill, she'd told me, her voice thin from the chemo. One day he's going to collapse and he'll take our girl down with him. She was right. She was always right. When she passed, Emily's grief nearly broke her, and Jason, instead of being her foundation, was an anchor pulling her under. So I acted. I cashed out the retirement fund Sarah and I had built, $150,000. I bought that little house, a bank foreclosure, and I spent 6 months rebuilding it with my own 2 hands. New roof, new PEX plumbing, new oak cabinets, new hardwood floors. I poured my sweat, my blood, and my grief into that place. I wanted it to be perfect, a fortress, a place to protect my daughter from the world, and more importantly, from her husband. I had lied to Emily. I told her I had business in Chicago this week. I wanted to show up unannounced. I wanted to see how they were living. I wanted to see if Jason was trying to sell the copper plumbing for scrap. I turned off the highway onto the long gravel driveway. There it was. The zoysia grass, green and thick, the grass I'd just paid $5,000 to have sodded. The white picket fence I'd painted myself, post by post. And then I slammed on the brakes. The F-150 skidded on the gravel, dust kicking up. I blinked, rubbing my eyes. I thought the grief was making me see things. But it was real. A recreational vehicle. No, that's too kind. It was a rolling tomb, a 1980s Winnebago, rust eating through the wheel wells. One side was crumpled, a window replaced with duct tape and a trash bag, and it was parked. Dear God, it was parked right on top of my perfect zoysia lawn. 2 deep, muddy ruts like scars were carved into the green sod. But that wasn't all. Trash. Bud Light cans, plastic bags, and greasy pizza boxes were strewn from the RV's door all the way to the front porch. The cedar porch I had spent a week sanding and sealing. A rage started to build in my chest. It wasn't hot. It was a cold burn. I killed the engine. The silence of the Illinois countryside was shattered by the slam of my truck door. I stalked across the lawn, trying not to look at the muddy tracks. I reached back onto the passenger seat and grabbed the heaviest tool I owned, my 28-ounce framing hammer. Not because I planned to use it, not yet, but because the foundation of this day, the foundation of the peace I tried to build for Emily, had just cracked, and I needed the familiar weight of that hammer in my hand. I stalked up the porch steps. My boots hit the cedar planks with a heavy rhythmic thud. Each step was a hammer blow. The front door. The solid oak door I'd spent a weekend hanging, the one I'd fitted with a $500 Medeco security lock, was wide open. Not just unlocked, wide open. The carelessness of it made my blood boil. It was a message. It said, "We don't care." It said, "This isn't yours anymore." Anyone could walk right in. A raccoon, a burglar, or worse, a 70-year-old father-in-law. I stopped at the threshold, my hand tightening on the hammer. I could smell it. A thick, sour wave of odors hit me. Stale tobacco, old grease, the unmistakable stench of unwashed bodies, and underlying it all the sharp chemical smell of nail polish. Then I heard the sounds from inside. It wasn't laughter. It wasn't the happy sound of a daughter settling into her new home. It was shouting. A woman's voice. Shrill, sharp, and dripping with contempt. A voice I instantly recognized, though I'd only heard it twice at Emily's wedding and her rehearsal dinner. Deborah, Jason's mother. "What is wrong with you? Are you trying to break all my good plates? You useless thing." Another voice, smaller, broken. A voice I knew better than my own heartbeat. "I'm sorry. It slipped." It was Emily. My daughter. I didn't hesitate. I barged in. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. I moved past the entryway I had tiled myself. The kitchen. Dear God, my kitchen. I spent $30,000 on that kitchen. I had argued with the supplier for a week to get that specific cut of Ubatuba granite. I had installed the custom oak cabinets myself, ensuring every joint was perfect, every door flush. It was a war zone. Dishes, not one or two, a mountain of them. They were piled high in the stainless steel sink, overflowing onto the granite, caked with dried ketchup and God knows what. Greasy fast food wrappers littered the floor I had tiled. And there, in the middle of the filth, was my daughter. Emily was on her knees, on the Italian tile floor I had laid just last month. She was frantically trying to scrub a puddle of spilled orange juice with a dirty rag. Her hair, usually so neat, was matted and pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing an old stained t-shirt that I recognized as one of mine from 20 years ago. And she was crying. Her shoulders shaking with silent, desperate sobs. Sitting perched on the kitchen island, the island I built like some vulture on a fence post, was Deborah. She was painting her toenails, a bright, vulgar red. The stench of the polish remover filled the air. She was examining her foot with intense concentration, not even bothering to look down at her daughter-in-law, who was kneeling just inches away. At the dining table, the one that came with the house, sat two men I didn't recognize. One older, paunchy, with thinning gray hair, who must be Gary Deborah's husband. He was shoveling cereal into his mouth straight from the box. The other was younger, maybe 40, fat, wearing a stained undershirt that showed off his belly. Jason's brother, Mitch. They were both glued to a 50-inch television, not the one I thought that was blaring a football game so loud the walls seemed to shake. They didn't even notice me. They were treating my daughter like a servant, like a dog. In the house I built, with my wife's money. The framing hammer felt heavy and suddenly very small in my hand. Emily, I roared. My voice bounced off the new drywall louder than the television. The entire room froze. Deborah jumped, smearing red polish across her foot. Damn it, she hissed, looking up, her face a mask of annoyance. The two men at the table snapped their heads around their faces, slack with surprise, mouths still full of cereal. Emily looked up. Her face was streaked with tears and grime. When she saw me standing there in my work overalls, hammer in hand, I expected relief. I expected her to run to me. I didn't see relief. I saw pure animal terror. Her eyes widened and she actually shrank back as if I were the threat. Dad, what the hell is happening here? I repeated. My voice was low now. It was the voice I used on job sites right before I fired someone. It was cold as a Chicago winter. Jason was the first to move. He scrambled out of the living room where I assume he'd been hiding, buttoning his shirt. He always was a cockroach, scuttling away when the lights came on. His usual fake politician's smile was plastered on his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were darting everywhere, from the hammer in my hand to my furious expression, to his mother, and back to me. Dad. Art. Wow, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you. He tried to spread his arms for a hug. I raised my free hand, the one not holding the hammer, and stopped him in his tracks. Don't call me Dad. I'm not your dad. Answer the question. What is going on? I pointed the hammer head toward Emily, who was still frozen on the floor. Why is my daughter on her knees crying? And why? I jerked my chin toward the dining table. Is your entire family in this house? Jason swallowed. I could see the sweat pop up on his forehead. He started to stammer, trying to assemble his lies. Art, look, it's a terrible misunderstanding. My parents, we were evicted. Deborah cut in. Her voice was no longer the sharp hiss I'd heard earlier. It was now sickeningly sweet, dripping with false sympathy. She slid off the island, walking toward me, waving her wet-nailed hands in the air to dry them. Oh, Mr. Morgan, thank goodness you're here. You see, we've had this most terrible run of bad luck. Bad luck, I repeated. My voice was flat. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Yes. Jason latched onto the word, his voice getting stronger as the lie took shape. Our landlord. He went bankrupt or something. The bank seized the building. They gave them 24 hours to get out. Can you believe that? 24 hours? It was a lie. I could smell it. A well-rehearsed lie. A good contractor can spot a warped 2x4 from a mile away. I can spot a lie just as easily. And this one was worse than a cheap, waterlogged piece of pressboard. The truth, I figured, was that they hadn't paid rent in months. And my brother Mitch, Jason continued, pointing to the oaf at the table who was now trying to look pathetic. His apartment. It caught fire. A terrible electrical accident. He lost everything. Is that right? I said, my voice heavy with sarcasm. An eviction and a fire. On the same day. What a hell of a coincidence. Deborah put a hand over her heart, feigning distress. Mr. Morgan, we know this is sudden. But we're family. And Emily? She shot a look at my daughter, a look as sharp and cold as a razor. She was so kind. She insisted we stay here. She begged us. Another lie. A blatant, disgusting lie. It's just for a few weeks, she added, her voice syrupy. Just until we can find a new place. Just to get back on our feet. A few weeks. Yes, yes, Jason said, nodding vigorously. A very short time. They just needed a roof over their heads. We couldn't let them sleep in that RV on the street, could we? I turned my gaze to my daughter. She had finally managed to stand up, but she wouldn't look at me. She was wringing the dirty orange juice rag in her hands. Emily, is this true? Emily nodded weakly, her head bowed. Tears dripped off her chin onto the floor. Yes, Dad, she whispered. They They had nowhere to go. I couldn't let them be homeless. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. It all happened so fast. She was lying, or she was being forced to lie. I saw her eyes flick quickly toward Jason, just a fraction of a second. But it was enough. It was fear. She was terrified of him. I understood. In that instant, I understood. I couldn't confront them, not now. If I threw them out, Emily would be the one to pay the price as soon as my truck left the driveway. I was trapped. I'm just tired, Emily whispered as if reading my thoughts. They're helping me get things organized. Organized, I looked around the kitchen. It looked like a tornado hit it. But I saw the terror in my daughter's eyes. I had to play their game. For her. All right, I said the word tasting like ash in my mouth. A few weeks. I saw Jason and Deborah visibly relax. The tension left their shoulders. Jason's fake smile returned. Deborah looked smug. But, I continued, we're going to have some rules. I took a long, slow breath. I looked at Deborah at her fake, brittle smile. I looked at Jason, who was sweating. And I looked at my daughter, Emily, who was desperately trying to become invisible. A few weeks, I said, letting the words hang in the air. All right, a few weeks. I saw Jason and Deborah share a look of triumph. They thought they'd won. They thought the old man had backed down. But, I continued, while you're here, that thing. I pointed out the window at the rusted Winnebago that was bleeding oil onto my $5,000 lawn. Get it off the grass. Right now. I don't care where you put it. Park it on the street. I don't want to see it. Deborah's face tightened, her victory souring. Well, it's not hurting anything. Get it off my lawn. Jason, seeing the look in my eyes, immediately panicked and waved his hands. Yes, of course, Bill. Right away, Mitch, he yelled at his brother, who was still focused on the TV. Mitch, you hear him, move the damn RV. Now. Mitch grunted, clearly annoyed, and grabbed a set of keys, letting the screen door slam behind him. I wasn't finished. And another thing, I said, my voice low and steady. I was just walking past the guest bathroom. The faucet is leaking. I heard it dripping. This was a lie. A bold-faced lie. I had installed that $200 Kohler faucet myself. It was solid brass ceramic discs. It wouldn't leak for 50 years. But I needed a reason they couldn't refuse. I'm staying the night to fix it, I announced. If the room was icy before, it was now the dark side of the moon. I watched Jason and Deborah exchange a look. It wasn't just annoyance this time. It was pure, unadulterated panic. Staying the night. Jason stammered, the fake smile completely gone. He looked like a fish gasping for air. But Bill, the house is a mess. You saw it. We don't even have a proper bed for you. You'd be much more comfortable at the Holiday Inn in town. Really? We can even pay for it? You'll pay for it. I raised an eyebrow. With what money? No. I cut him off before he could stammer another excuse. I'm not comfortable sleeping in a hotel, I said, my voice hard. I'm not comfortable when a $200 faucet is dripping. That's wasting water. Wasting my money. I'm staying. The sofa will be fine. Emily, for the first time, looked directly at me. I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes, a tiny spark immediately drowned by that same terrible fear. She wanted me to stay, and she was terrified of what would happen if I did. That settles it, I said, cutting off any more protests. I turned, walked back to my F-150, and grabbed my heavy-duty Milwaukee toolbox from the passenger seat. It was heavy. It was solid. It was real. I carried it back inside, walking right past Deborah, so close She had to physically recoil to avoid being hit by the metal box. I set it down in the middle of the living room floor with a heavy, definitive thud. It was a statement. It was an anchor. William Anderson was not leaving. I looked at the terror and fury swirling in the eyes of my new house guests. I knew in that moment I had just kicked the hornet's nest. Good. I looked at my heavy toolbox sitting in the middle of their living room. It was an anchor, and I was the ship. Jason, I said, my voice dangerously calm, put my bag in the guest room. Jason looked like a cornered rat. He looked at his mother, then at me. He couldn't refuse, but he couldn't obey either. About that. Art. The guest room. Well, Mitch is using it. I kept my face neutral. Mitch. The 38-year-old unemployed son. The one who lost his apartment in the fire. Yeah, Jason stammered. He needed the space. He's got a lot of stuff. I see. I didn't move. I just stared at him. Fine. Then I'll take the master bedroom. The one I designed for Emily and you. The one with the lake view. Jason's face went white. He physically recoiled. Oh, no. You can't, Art. That one is taken too. Taken? I said, my voice dropping even lower. By who? Jason wouldn't look at me. He mumbled into his chest. My parents are in there. You know, they're older. They need the private bathroom. I was speechless. That room was Sarah's. When we were rebuilding the house, Sarah was already weak from the chemo. She sat in her wheelchair in the gutted frame of the second floor and pointed with a trembling finger. I want the window there, Art, she had whispered. Right there. I want to see the sunrise over the water. I built that window for her. I insulated that room myself twice as much as code required so she would never be cold. I put in the hardwood floors thinking it would be a sanctuary for her. And after she was gone, I gave it to Emily as a legacy. A piece of her mother's soul. And now, Deborah and Gary, those vultures, they were sleeping in Sarah's room. I didn't say a word. I didn't trust myself to speak. I pushed past Jason, my shoulder, checking him hard as I went by. Art, Dad, wait, he called out, scrambling after me. I ignored him. I stalked up the stairs I had built. My boots were heavy on the oak treads. I reached the landing and went straight for the master bedroom door. It was closed. I didn't knock. I threw the door open. It hit the wall with a crack. A wave of stale, cheap tobacco smoke hit me in the face. It was suffocating. Deborah and Gary had turned Sarah's sanctuary into a roadside motel room. A filthy one. Dirty clothes were thrown over the beautiful linen armchair Sarah had picked out. An ashtray overflowing with cigarette butts was balanced precariously on the windowsill right by Sarah's lake view. A small crappy television was set up on the dresser I had hand-finished a game show blaring. But that wasn't the worst of it. The thing that made my vision go red was the wall opposite the bed. The wall where I had hung a large framed photograph of Sarah and me on our wedding day. Sarah, young, beautiful, laughing into the camera. The first thing Emily was supposed to see every morning. It was gone. In its place, hanging crookedly from the nail, was a cheap velvet painting of dogs playing poker. I scanned the room, my rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. And then I saw it. My wedding photo. Our wedding photo. It was on the floor, in a corner, face down, tossed aside next to a pair of Gary's dirty socks. This wasn't just disrespect. This wasn't just an invasion. This was a desecration. They were literally wiping Sarah's memory from the room. I clenched my fists so hard my knuckles cracked. I turned around, my face a mask. Jason was standing right behind me, pale and panting. I walked right past him, not touching him, not looking at him. I walked back down the stairs, each step a controlled descent. I stood in the living room. I looked at the sofa. I looked at the half-inflated air mattress in the corner. I turned to Jason, who had followed me down. "So?" I asked, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "Where do I sleep?" Jason, trembling, pointed. He pointed to the sofa. "Emily and we're on the air mattress. You can have the sofa." The sofa, in the house I built, while strangers slept in my wife's bed. I nodded. "Fine," I said. "The sofa it is." But as I looked at him, he didn't see my anger. He only saw that I had agreed. He didn't realize that the fight wasn't over. It had just moved underground. I didn't say anything to Jason. I didn't say anything about the sofa. I just turned my back on him. I walked away from the living room, past the disastrous kitchen, and toward the back door that led to the garage. "Dad." "Art?" "Where are you going?" Jason called after me, his voice laced with a new anxiety. "My tools," I said, not looking back. "I'm putting my tools away." If the master bedroom was Sarah's sanctuary, the garage was mine. It was more than just a place to park a car. It was my workshop. I had spent 2 weeks organizing it. I'd installed a heavy-duty workbench, wired extra 220-volt outlets, and set up pegboards. My tools, my $15,000 collection of Milwaukee power tools that I had spent a lifetime acquiring, were hanging there. Each drill, each saw, each wrench had its place. It was clean. It was organized. It was mine. I opened the door to the garage. The stench hit me first. It wasn't just old oil or sawdust. It was a wave of stale beer body odor and the unmistakable skunky smell of marijuana. I flipped the light switch. My heart sank. My garage. My workshop. It was gone. Mitch, the 38-year-old brother, had turned my sanctuary into his personal dump. He had dragged a filthy mattress, stained and bare, into the corner where my main workbench stood. A small, buzzing mini-fridge was pushed against the wall, surrounded by a mountain of empty beer cans and fast food bags. A small, greasy television sat on top of my rolling tool chest. And the floor. The clean, sealed concrete floor I had just polished. It was covered in ash, spilled beer, and God knows what else. But that wasn't the worst of it. He was using my brand new $500 heavy-duty steel sawhorse as a footrest. His muddy boots were propped up on it as he lay back on the mattress watching TV. And my tools, my Milwaukee collection. The pegboard was half empty. My tools were scattered across the floor. My new cordless M18 drill was lying in the corner near a half-eaten plate of something caked in what looked like dried chili. He hadn't just used them. He had violated them. I stood there paralyzed by a rage so pure and cold, it almost stopped my heart. Mitch finally noticed me. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and lazy from the weed and the beer. He didn't sit up. He didn't move his feet. He just smirked, a greasy, arrogant smile. "Oh, hey, Dad," he slurred. "What you need?" My voice came out as a whisper. It was barely audible, but it cut through the sound of the blaring TV. "My tools." "Huh. My tools. Where are they?" Mitch waved a lazy hand toward the corner. "Oh, that old junk, it's over there in the corner. I needed the space, it was cluttered." Cluttered. My organized workshop was cluttered. He then had the audacity to prop his head up on one hand. "Hey, you got any cash? I'm out of beer. Jason said you were good for it." I looked at the corner he had pointed to. My precision drivers, my router, my circular saw, just piled up like firewood covered in dust. I felt something snap. I didn't say another word. I didn't confront him. I didn't yell. I simply turned around, stepped back into the house, and slammed the heavy fire door to the garage. The boom echoed through the entire house. It wasn't a slam of frustration. It was a declaration of war. This was not a family in need. This was an invasion. This was an occupation. And I was done being the victim. The tension in that house was thick enough to cut with a handsaw. It coated everything. After I slammed the garage door, Jason had rushed over pale and stammering. "Dad, Art, look, I'll talk to Mitch. I'll get him to clean it up. I promise, just calm down. Emily is making dinner. Let's just have a calm family dinner." Family dinner. I'd repeated the words, tasting like poison. But I looked over his shoulder and saw Emily in the kitchen, her face pale with terror, frantically pulling pots and pans. She was trapped, and my yelling wasn't helping her. So I nodded. "Fine. Dinner." Now I was sitting at the dining table I had built, watching my daughter struggle to cook for 6 people in a kitchen that looked like a bomb had gone off. She was sweating, trying to juggle 3 pans on the stove while also placating Deborah, who was complaining that the smell of garlic was too strong. I just watched. I kept my mouth shut. I observed. Emily finally brought the food to the table. Roasted chicken and mashed potatoes. It was simple, but I knew it was all she had the energy to make. She served everyone first, her hands shaking slightly. Deborah, Gary, Mitch, Jason, then me. She served herself last, barely taking anything. We ate in silence for the first few minutes. The only sounds were Mitch shoveling food into his mouth and the scraping of forks on the plates. Then Deborah set her glass down, hard. "Emily," she said, her voice sharp, "get me a glass of water." Emily, who had just sat down, immediately stood up. "Yes, Deborah, of course." "With ice," Deborah called after her. "And don't be lazy with it. Fill it up." My jaw tightened. I watched Emily hurry back with the water, placing it carefully by Deborah's plate. Gary, the father who hadn't spoken more than 2 words since I arrived, finally chimed in. He poked at his chicken. "This is dry," he muttered. "My wife makes a better chicken." Deborah nodded, chewing with her mouth open. "He's right. It's dry. You have to learn to keep the moisture in, girl." Mitch, speaking around a mouthful of potatoes, oohed. "You out of mashed potatoes already? You made like nothing." I looked at Jason, my son-in-law, the man who was supposed to protect my daughter. He was staring intently at his plate, eating as if nothing was wrong. He was a coward, plain and simple. "Jason," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the tension. He flinched, looking up. "Yeah, Art. You're not going to say anything. Say what? Your wife," I said, pointing my fork at Emily, "is being treated like a servant." Jason turned red. He shot a terrified look at his mother, then at me. He had to choose a side, and he chose wrong. "Dad, Art, come on," he said, trying to laugh it off. "They're just giving feedback. Right, Mom?" He turned to Emily, his voice fake and placating. "That's right, honey. Mom's right. The chicken is a little dry. You should just pay more attention next time. No big deal." That was it. That was the snap. The sound of a man's patience breaking. I didn't yell. I didn't have to. I slammed my flat palm down on the solid oak table. The crack was like a gunshot in the small room. The plates jumped. The water glasses sloshed. Mitch dropped his fork. Everyone froze. "Shut up," I said. My voice was low, but it vibrated with 50 years of controlled anger. "All of you, shut up." I turned my gaze on Deborah. "Emily is the owner of this house. She is not your servant. She is not your maid. And she is not girl." I looked at Gary and Mitch. "You are guests. You are eating food she cooked in a house she owns. You will show some damn respect. Or you can get out and eat from that trash heap you call an RV." I looked at Jason. "And you're her husband. Act like it. Or God help you, I will." I sat back expecting, I don't know what I expected. Yelling a fight. I expected Emily to look relieved. I expected a thank you, Dad. I thought I was her hero. But the reaction that came was the most confusing, terrifying twist of the night. Emily burst into tears, but it wasn't a cry of relief. It was a wail of pure, unadulterated panic. She wasn't looking at Deborah. She wasn't looking at Jason. She was looking at me. Dad! Please! She shrieked, covering her face. Please, no, stop! Don't do this! You're making everything worse! I was stunned. I just sat there, my hand still stinging from hitting the table. Worse, how could I be making it worse? I was defending her. The fear in her eyes wasn't for her in-laws. It was for me. She was terrified that I was there, that I was intervening. It was in that moment, looking at my daughter sobbing in fear of me, that I realized I was completely wrong. I had misunderstood everything. This wasn't about a rude family. This wasn't about them overstaying their welcome. This was something else. Something much deeper and much darker. And my daughter was trapped in the middle of it, terrified I would find out what it was. The rest of that dinner was eaten in absolute suffocating silence. Emily's words, "You're making everything worse," echoed in my head, drowning out the sound of Mitch's chewing. I didn't understand. How was I the bad guy? I was protecting her. But the look of sheer terror she gave me, it wasn't terror of them. It was terror of me blowing their cover. I realized I was a bull in a china shop. I was a contractor trying to fix a delicate electrical problem by swinging a sledgehammer. I was doing it all wrong. When the meal was over, or rather, when everyone had pushed their cold, dry chicken around their plates enough, Deborah and Gary retired. They went upstairs, to Sarah's room. I heard the door close. Mitch slunk back to the garage, probably to his beer and his weed. Jason grabbed Emily by the arm, not roughly, but possessively. He pulled her toward the air mattress in the corner of the living room. "We need to talk," he muttered. I watched them. They sat on the edge of the mattress, whispering furiously. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Jason's gestures. He was placating her, rubbing her back, but his face was tight with anger. He was managing the situation. He was managing her. And Emily just nodded, crying silently, looking defeated. I was left alone. I didn't bother with the leaking faucet. It was a stupid excuse anyway. I grabbed a thin blanket from the linen closet, one of the few things that still smelled like home, and lay down on the sofa. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I was 70 years old, lying on a lumpy sofa in a house I paid for, while my wife's memory was being desecrated upstairs, and my daughter was being held prisoner right in front of my eyes. I lay there all night, fully clothed, my boots still on, listening. I heard the springs of the air mattress creak. I heard Gary cough upstairs. I heard Mitch open the garage door at 3 a.m., probably for more beer. My rage from earlier had cooled. It had hardened into something else. Something cold, heavy, and sharp. It was the feeling I got right before a demolition. The moment you stop looking at the building and start calculating exactly where to place the charges. When the first gray light of dawn crept through the windows, I had a new plan. A better plan. I got up from the sofa. My back ached in 3 different places. I walked into the kitchen. The mountain of dishes was still there now, attracting flies. I didn't touch them. I just made coffee. Deborah was the first one down, shuffling into the kitchen in a dirty pink robe, her face puffy. She looked surprised to see me. She probably expected me to be gone. "You're still here," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm making coffee," I said, my voice neutral. Jason came out a minute later, his hair a mess. He saw me and tensed up, ready for another confrontation. This was my moment. I poured a cup of coffee and handed it to Deborah. She looked at the cup, confused. "Jason, Deborah," I said, my voice quiet. "I need to apologize." They both stared at me. "I was hot-headed last night." I said, looking at the floor like a defeated man. I was upset. Seeing the picture frame, it brought back memories of Sarah. I took it out on you. I watched them. Jason's posture relaxed. Deborah's sour expression softened into a look of smug victory. I've been thinking all night, I continued. And Jason, you're right. Your parents are in trouble. Your family. And family. Families should help each other. It was the most disgusting lie I had ever told. It felt like swallowing gravel. But it worked. Deborah and Jason exchanged a look. The look. The one that said, "The old fool bought it. He's broken." "Oh, Bill," Deborah said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We understand. You're grieving. We're just trying to help Emily, you know. Take some of the burden off her." I know, I said, and I'm getting in the way. I took a deep breath. This was the critical part. Look, I'm a mess right now. I just remembered I have an appointment back in Chicago. My cardiologist. My follow-up, you know. I tapped my chest. They knew I'd had a mild heart attack 3 years ago. It was the perfect leverage. I completely forgot about it. I have to drive back today. Jason's face lit up. He was trying to hide his relief, but he was terrible at it. "Oh no, of course, Bill. You have to take care of your health. That's the most important thing." "Yeah," I said. "So I'm gonna head out. I'll probably be gone. A few days. Maybe till the end of the week. You all just get settled. Do what you need to do." I was giving them the rope. I just needed to see if they would hang themselves with it. I'll come back this weekend, see how things are." "That's great, Dad," Jason said, using the word dad now that he thought he was in control. He stepped forward and gave me a one-armed hug. "Thank you. You're the best. Really. We'll take good care of Emily. Drive safe." I had to stop myself from shoving him through the drywall. I just patted his back. "Right. I'll see you, son." I grabbed my toolbox. I didn't look at Emily, who was just emerging from the living room, her eyes wide with confusion and betrayal. She thought I was abandoning her. I couldn't look at her. If I did, I would have broken. I walked out the front door, got into my F-150, and drove away. I watched Jason and Deborah waving at me from the porch, smiling their victorious smiles. They thought they had won. They thought the old man was gone. I drove down the gravel road, turned onto the main highway, and then I took the first exit. I didn't go north to Chicago. I went west toward Peoria. I wasn't going far. I didn't drive north to Chicago. I didn't even go east. I turned the F-150 west on I-74 and drove 30 miles to Peoria. It was a big enough city where I wouldn't run into anyone I knew, and it was in the opposite direction of my doctor's appointment. I wasn't going to Best Buy or Walmart. A contractor knows you don't buy professional tools from a hobby shop. You go to a specialty supplier. This was the same principle. I needed professional tools for a dirty job. I found what I was looking for, tucked away in an old strip mall, squeezed between a laundromat and a vape shop. The sign just said Peoria Spy and Security Solutions. The windows were tinted so dark you couldn't see inside. It was the kind of place you only go to when you're either paranoid or desperate. I was both. A small electronic bell tinkled when I opened the door. The place smelled like dust and new plastic. It was tiny, lined with shelves of strange gadgets, pens with wires sticking out, GPS trackers that looked like rocks, glasses with tiny lenses in the frames. A young man, maybe 30, with thin glasses and a bored expression, looked up from a workbench covered in wires and circuit boards. "Can I help you?" I walked straight to the counter. I didn't have time to browse. "I need the best hidden cameras you have," I said, my voice low. "I need them to be Wi-Fi enabled. I need to watch the live feed from my phone. And they must have clear audio." I put my calloused hands on the counter, and I need 5 of them. The kid's bored expression vanished, replaced by a flicker of professional interest. He didn't ask why. I liked that about him. He just nodded. Home security, sir, or something. Something else, I said. Right. He came out from behind the counter and led me to a locked glass case. Audio is key, he said. Most of the cheap stuff you find online has terrible audio or it's illegal depending on the state. But since this is your property, we can talk about professional grade. He pointed to a few items that looked like junk. These are our best sellers. They look like everyday objects. The technology is in the adapter. He held up what looked exactly like an Apple USB phone charger. This one is simple. Plug it into any wall outlet. It functions as a real charger, so it's completely invisible. Records 4K video streams directly to your phone and the microphone. The microphone can pick up a whisper from 20 feet away. I nodded. That's good. What else? If you need a wider view like for a living room or a larger bedroom, I recommend this. He pointed to a small black digital alarm clock. It's got a 180-degree lens night vision and the same audio specs. Sits on a nightstand or a dresser, nobody looks twice. I'll take 4 of the chargers, I said, and 1 of the clocks. He raised an eyebrow. That's a serious setup, sir. It's a serious situation. As he went to the back room to gather the boxes, a wave of disgust washed over me. I felt sick to my stomach. Here I was, William Anderson, 70 years old, a man who had built his reputation on honesty and hard work, and I was buying spy equipment to bug my own daughter's home. The home I gave her. I was violating her privacy. I was becoming the kind of sneaking, suspicious old man I always despised. But then the image from last night flashed into my mind. Emily on her knees scrubbing the floor. Deborah painting her nails, calling her useless. The look of pure animal terror in my daughter's eyes when her father had tried to defend her. She wasn't scared of them. She was scared of me making things worse. And I thought of Sarah. I thought of her face in the hospital, her last words to me. Protect our girl, Bill. Protect her from him. I had failed. I had handed her over to the wolves wrapped in the gift of a new house. The guilt of spying vanished. It was replaced by the cold, hard certainty of a contractor checking a foundation. The foundation was cracked. And I wasn't just going to patch it. I was going to find out why it cracked, and if I had to tear the whole damn thing down and start over. I would. The kid returned with 5 small plain boxes. All right, that'll be $812 plus tax. 800. Flat. Cash, I said. He smiled. Cash is good. I pulled 9 fresh $100 bills from my wallet, part of the emergency cash I always keep hidden under the floor mat of my truck, and laid them on the counter. I didn't want a paper trail. He counted the money, then swept it into a drawer. He handed me a plain black plastic bag. They're already charged. The app is simple. Just scan the QR code on the back. You'll be set up in 5 minutes. As long as they're plugged in and the house has Wi-Fi, you'll see and hear everything. I nodded, taking the bag. It felt heavier than my 28-ounce framing hammer. I walked out of the store, the bell tinkling behind me. I got back in my F-150 and sat there for a minute, the bag on the seat beside me. I was about to cross a line I could never uncross, but Sarah would never forgive me if I let them destroy our daughter. I put the truck in gear. It was time to go back. I didn't drive back right away. I couldn't risk them still being there. I drove to a diner in Peoria, ordered a black coffee I didn't want, and watched the clock on the wall. An hour passed. Then another. Every minute felt like sandpaper on my nerves. I needed them all out of the house. All of them. At 2 p.m. I figured it was safe. I pulled out my phone and dialed Emily. This was the gamble. If Jason or Deborah answered, it rang once, twice, then a click, but no one spoke. Emily? I kept my voice low. I heard a sharp intake of breath, then a choked, frantic whisper. Dad! Oh my God, Dad! Are you alone? I said, cutting her off. Yes, she sobbed. They all went to the store, to Walmart. They took my credit card. I didn't want to go. They said I had to stay and clean the bathrooms. They took her card. The bastards. My fury solidified into a cold, hard resolve. Listen to me, I said, my voice calm, controlled. I left my wallet. I think it's on the sofa under the cushion. Can you check? This was the pretext. My wallet was safe in my back pocket. Yes, she said, desperation in her voice. It's here, I see it. Are you coming back, Dad, please? I'm coming back to get it right now, I said. I'm about 20 minutes out. Just have it ready. I hung up, threw $5 on the counter, and ran to my truck. I drove back, not like a 70-year-old man with a heart condition, but like a desperate father. I pushed the F-150, racing the clock. I didn't drive up the main driveway. I took the old access road I'd used during construction, parking the truck behind a stand of pine trees, 100 yards from the house. I ran. I moved faster than I had in years, the black plastic bag from the spy shop clutched in my hand. I came in through the back door, the one off the kitchen. Emily was standing there, wringing her hands, my wallet clutched in her fist. She looked pale, terrified. Dad, you have to go, she whispered, trying to push the wallet into my hand. They could be back any minute. Jason. He was so mad you stayed. I grabbed her shoulders, gently but firmly. Breathe, Emily. Just breathe. Look at me. Her terrified eyes met mine. I'm not leaving, I whispered. Not really. I'm handling this, but I need you to trust me. Don't say a word. Don't tell them I came back. Do you understand? She nodded, tears welling up again. Good girl, I said. Now stand by the front window. Watch for their car. If you see that disgusting RV or Jason's car turn onto the road, you cough. Loudly. Twice. Got it. She nodded again, wiping her eyes, and ran to the living room window, peering through the blinds like a soldier in a foxhole. I got to work. I was a contractor. I knew how to move. I pulled the 5 small boxes from the bag. First, the kitchen. I ripped open the first USB charger. I unplugged the coffee maker. I plugged the spy camera into the outlet on the counter, then plugged the coffee maker into it. It was perfect. It had a clear view of the kitchen, the dining table, and the back door. Second, the living room. Emily was there, while her back to me, watching the road. I moved to the entertainment center. I found the outlet behind the big screen TV they had brought in. I plugged in the second charger. It would capture every word spoken on that sofa. Third, I ran upstairs. My heart hammered as I approached Sarah's room. I pushed the door open. The smell of stale smoke and cheap perfume hit me. I walked over to Deborah's nightstand next to the overflowing ashtray. I unplugged her alarm clock and plugged in the new one. The digital numbers glowed to life. It looked identical. It was aimed right at the bed and the rest of the room. Fourth, the garage. I ran back down through the kitchen and into the garage. The smell of weed and old beer was stronger. Mitch was passed out on the filthy mattress, snoring. I didn't care. I found an outlet by the workbench he had defiled and plugged in the fourth charger. It was aimed right at his living space. I had one left, the fifth charger, the hallway. I plugged it into a low outlet near the front door, aimed at the staircase and the living room entrance. I was done. Maybe 4 minutes, tops. Dad, Emily coughed. A sharp, loud, terrified cough. My blood ran cold. Again, I whispered. Calf, calf. She coughed again, her voice shaking. Go back to the kitchen. Mop the floor. Do something, I hissed. I ran to the back door, the empty boxes crushed in my hand. I shoved my old wallet back into my pocket. I sprinted back through the yard, diving into the tree line just as I heard the rumble of that cursed Winnebago turning onto the gravel driveway. I didn't stop running until I was back in my truck, my heart pounding against my ribs, gasping for air. I drove off, taking the access road, my tires spinning in the dirt. I felt like a spy, a commando in his own family's tragedy. But it was done. The eyes and ears were in place. I drove 15 miles down the highway, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. My hands were still shaking from the adrenaline from the fear of being caught. I pulled into a Motel 6, the sign buzzing with a missing letter. It was the kind of place people go when they don't want to be found. It was perfect. I paid cash for one night. The room smelled like industrial bleach and stale cigarettes, a chemical cocktail that burned my nose. The carpet was a stained, ugly shade of brown. The bedspread had a pattern I'm sure was designed to hide stains. It was a miserable box. But it was my command center. I locked the deadbolt, pulled the chain, and jammed a chair under the doorknob just in case. Old habits from rough job sites. I pulled my laptop from its case. It was an old heavy Dell, but it was reliable. I sat on the lumpy bed, booted it up. The motel Wi-Fi was painfully slow. A spinning wheel. I found myself holding my breath. Oh, what if it didn't work? What if the signal was too weak? What if they found the cameras? Finally, the desktop loaded. I clicked the icon for the camera app the kid at the spy shop had told me to download. The screen flickered, and then they appeared. 5 small black screens, one for each camera. They loaded one by one. Screen 1, the kitchen. Empty. The mountain of dishes was still there. Screen 2, the living room. Empty. My toolbox was still sitting by the sofa, an anchor of my presence. Screen 3, the hallway. Empty. Screen 4, the garage. I saw Mitch passed out on the mattress, snoring. The idiot was still asleep. Screen 5, the master bedroom. Sarah's room. Empty. The bed was unmade. The painting of the dogs playing poker was still crooked on the wall. They were all online. They were all working. I plugged in my earbuds and cranked up the volume, isolating the audio feeds. I heard nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator. The sound of Mitch snoring. I sat back, and I waited. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm a man of action. If a wall is crooked, I tear it down. If a pipe leaks, I fix it. But now all I could do was sit in a cheap motel room smelling bleach and watch. I felt useless. I felt like a coward, and I felt guilty. I was spying on my own daughter. What kind of father does that then? I thought of Sarah's face. Protect our girl, Bill. No, I wasn't a coward. I was a father. I was doing what I had to do. I was gathering evidence. I wasn't going to go in swinging a hammer this time. I was going to go in with a wrecking ball made of lawyers and videotape. An hour passed. My coffee went cold. Then I heard it. The sound of a car door slamming coming through the hallway camera's microphone. I leaned forward, my eyes glued to the screen. The front door opened. Deborah and Gary walked in, their arms full of grocery bags. Jason and Mitch, who must have woken up, followed. Emily was last, carrying the 2 heaviest cases of water. The show was starting. Put that stuff on the counter, Deborah ordered, dropping her purse on the dining table. And don't just stand there, Emily. Start unpacking. I want that chicken in the oven in 10 minutes. I watched Jason walk right past his wife, who was struggling with the water, and collapse onto the sofa. He picked up the TV remote. Mitch threw a bag of chips on the counter. Did you get my beer? I told you to get the Coors. They only had Bud Light, Deborah snapped. You'll drink what we give you. And you, she pointed at Emily, stop staring and start cooking. We're starving. I felt the familiar cold rage rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I wasn't Bill the father right now. I was Bill the contractor. I was inspecting the damage. I sat there in the growing darkness of the motel room, my face lit only by the pale glow of the 5 screens. I watched my daughter work. I listened to them complain. I listened to them treat her like dirt. I felt like God watching a world I had created fall apart, and I knew I couldn't look away. I had to see it all. I owed it to Sarah. I owed it to Emily. I sat in that bleach-stinking motel room for hours. The sun set, and the room went from gray to black. I didn't turn on a light. I just watched the 4 glowing screens on my laptop. I watched my life, my daughter's life, play out like some sick reality show. It was around 3 in the afternoon when I saw Deborah walk into the kitchen. She was holding a piece of paper and a roll of tape. I watched her tape it to the front of the stainless steel refrigerator I had installed. I clicked the zoom function on the app. My fingers were stiff. It was a chore chart. A handwritten list of every job in that house. Cook breakfast, cook lunch, cook dinner, wash dishes, take out trash, clean all bathrooms, do laundry, mop floors. Down the side there were headers for the names. Jason, Deborah, Gary, Mitch, Emily. My blood went cold. Next to every single task in Deborah's looping, arrogant handwriting, there was a checkmark under only one name. Emily. 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 They hadn't just moved in. They had formalized their slavery. They had created a document to prove it. The afternoon wore on. I watched them drift in and out. Gary sat at the dining table reading the paper, leaving crumbs everywhere. Mitch came in from the garage, grabbed a beer, and left a smudge of grease on the refrigerator handle. Jason sat on the living room sofa, his feet on the coffee table, talking loudly on his phone about some big deal that was about to close. And through it all, Emily moved like a ghost. She cooked their lunch. She cleaned their mess. Not one of them offered to help. Not one of them even said thank you. Evening came. I watched my daughter, my girl, struggling in the kitchen I built. She was trying to make a big pot of soup and some chicken. The others were in the living room, the TV blasting. I could hear it through the living room mic. They were laughing at some stupid game show. Emily was alone, sweating, her hair sticking to her face. Deborah walked in. She didn't offer to help. She walked right over to the stove, grabbed a spoon, and dipped it directly into the soup pot. She tasted it. Her face twisted into a mask of disgust. "My God, girl," she snapped. I heard her voice clearly through the kitchen mic. "Did you dump the whole salt shaker in here? This is slop. It's inedible." Emily shrank back, her hands flying to her apron. I just followed the recipe, Deborah. I can add more water, maybe some potatoes." "You'll do no such thing," Deborah snapped. "You'll dump it. Dump it all out and start over. We're not eating this pig slop." I watched in disbelief. I watched as my daughter, her shoulders shaking, carried the heavy steaming pot of soup food for 6 people to the sink and poured the entire meal down the drain. She turned back to the cutting board, tears streaming down her face, and picked up a knife to start chopping new vegetables. Deborah just watched her for a moment, a look of cold satisfaction on her face before turning and walking back to the living room yelling, "That girl, I swear she can't do anything right." An hour later, the kitchen camera showed Emily, her face pale and streaked with tears, frantically trying to cook a second dinner. The garage camera feed crackled. I switched the audio. It was Mitch. He was standing at the door to the kitchen, holding a massive, greasy pile of clothes. He threw the bundle onto the clean kitchen floor I had just watched Emily mop. "Emily!" he yelled. She came running, wiping her hands on her apron, her eyes wide with fear. "What's this?" "That's my laundry, sweet cheeks," Mitch slurred. He sounded half drunk. "It's my work clothes. They're covered in grease. Don't you dare put them in the washing machine. You'll break it. You need to wash these by hand. In the utility sink. Get all the stains out." Emily just stared at the pile. It was disgusting. It was a pile of filthy rags. "Now," he commanded. "I need 'em for tomorrow." She looked back at the stove where the second attempt at dinner was clearly about to burn. She looked at the pile of filthy clothes. She didn't say a word. She just nodded, her eyes dead. She picked up the greasy bundle and carried it to the back porch to the utility sink. I watched her fill a bucket, her small frame struggling with the weight. This wasn't helping. This was humiliation. This was slavery. The hours crawled by. 9 p.m., 10 p.m. They ate the second dinner she made. This time they just complained that it was late. They left their plates on the table for her to clean. 11 p.m. Emily was washing the mountain of dishes. Midnight. She was scrubbing the floor again, where Mitch had thrown his clothes. 1 a.m. The house was finally quiet. The living room camera showed the TV was off. The garage camera showed Mitch was passed out. The master bedroom camera, Sarah's room, was dark. I switched back to the kitchen feed. And there she was. My daughter. She never made it to her air mattress. She had fallen asleep sitting at the kitchen table, her head resting in her arms, right next to a half-folded pile of Mitch's now clean laundry. She was utterly alone, exhausted, a prisoner in her own home. I sat there in the total darkness of my motel room, the only sound, the cheap air conditioner humming. I didn't feel anger anymore. That was gone. I felt something colder, something heavier. I felt the quiet, absolute certainty of a man about to tear a building down to its foundation. And I knew I had to keep watching. I had to see it all. I must have fallen asleep in that stiff vinyl chair. My neck was locked in a painful cramp. I woke up to the gray light of the laptop screen. On the kitchen camera feed, Emily was gone. The kitchen was clean, or at least cleaner. The mountain of dishes was done. The counters were wiped. The pile of Mitch's laundry was gone. My daughter, at some point in the dead of night, had gotten up, cleaned up after all of them, and then I assume collapsed onto her air mattress. I looked at the clock on my laptop. 10:00 a.m. I'd been asleep for hours. I quickly checked the other feeds. Deborah and Gary were in the master bedroom. Sarah's room awake watching that blaring game show. Mitch was in the garage smoking something and tinkering with my tools. My blood boiled, but I had to wait. Jason was in the living room pacing back and forth, talking on his cell phone, loud and obnoxious. I knew what day it was. It was the 15th of the month. When Sarah and I drew up our wills, our lawyer Mark Jenkins had a very smart idea. We both knew Jason was a black hole for money. We didn't want him to get his hands on Sarah's inheritance. So we set up an irrevocable trust. It was Sarah's money locked away tight. The trust was set to pay out exactly $3,000 every month on the 15th. It was mailed by physical check addressed only to Emily. It was her money. It was for the house bills, for food, for her to have a small piece of independence, a piece of her mother that Jason couldn't touch. I had been waiting for this day. I wanted to see what happened. At 10:32 a.m. I saw it. The living room camera, angled toward the front door, caught the flicker of the mail slot. I heard the clank as the mail dropped onto the hallway floor. Emily came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked exhausted, like a ghost in her own house. She bent down and picked up the small stack of letters. Instantly, Jason was off the sofa. He ended his phone call mid-sentence. He moved toward her, not like a husband, but like a hawk. "Mail's here," he asked, his voice overly casual. "It's just bills, Jason," Emily said, her voice flat, tired. She was shuffling through them. Junk, Bill? Let me see," he said, walking over, holding out his hand. "It's just bills, I said." "Give me the mail, Emily." His voice was low. I watched as her fingers hesitated, closing around one specific envelope, the one from the trust. Jason saw it. His eyes narrowed. He didn't ask again. He snatched the entire stack of mail from her hand. "Hey!" she cried out, a flicker of her old self. "Jason, that's mine. That's the trust fund check. Give it back." "It's our money, Emily." He sneered, tossing the junk mail onto the floor, and tearing open the trust fund envelope. He pulled out the check. $3,000. Jason, please, she begged. Her voice was thin and reedy. That's for the utilities. The electric bill is past due. The house insurance needs to be paid. That money is for the house. Shut up, Emily. He snapped, his voice low and menacing. I need this. The project is finally moving forward. I need capital. He waved the check in her face. And you know we have to support the family. This is how we do it. Just then, Deborah must have heard the argument. The kitchen camera feed showed her walking into the living room, robe pulled tight, a cup of coffee in her hand. What is all this yelling about? You're interrupting my show. She's trying to hide money from us, Jason said, pointing at Emily like she was a criminal. The check came. Deborah's eyes lit up. She walked over to Emily and looked down at her, a look of pure contempt. You selfish little brat, she hissed. My hand balled into a fist. I wanted to smash the laptop screen. You're crying about bills, Deborah continued, her voice dripping with venom. You want us all to starve while you hoard this money? I need my hair done. Mitch needs spending money. Gary needs his prescriptions. And your husband, she jabbed a finger at Jason, is trying to build an empire for you. $3,000 is nothing compared to what he's doing for us. Emily just stood there, tears rolling down her cheeks, defeated. It's my money, she whispered. It's our money, Jason corrected her. And then I watched the final betrayal, the act that sealed their fate. Jason didn't even put the check in his own pocket. He turned, smiled at his mother, and handed the check to her. Here, Mom, he said. You manage this. Make sure it goes where it's needed. Deborah snatched the check from his hand. She folded it neatly and tucked it deep into the pocket of her robe. She smiled a smug, victorious smile. She patted Jason on the cheek. That's my good boy. Then she looked at Emily, who was standing there, utterly broken. Now, Deborah said, go finish the laundry and stop that crying. It's pathetic. I sat there in the dark, sour-smelling motel room. I picked up the full cold can of soda I'd been holding since last night. My hand was shaking. I didn't throw it. I didn't yell. I slowly, deliberately crushed the can in my fist. Cold, sticky soda ran over my knuckles and onto the cheap bedspread. I didn't care. They hadn't just insulted my daughter. They hadn't just stolen her money. They were committing calculated, systematic financial abuse right in front of my eyes. And they were doing it using Sarah's legacy. I had them. I had the proof. But as I watched them celebrate on the screen, a new, colder thought entered my mind. This was too easy for them. This was too practiced. This wasn't just about a $3,000 check. I had a feeling this went even deeper, and I was going to sit right here until I found out what it was. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat in that stiff vinyl chair in the dark, the bleach smell burning my nostrils, and I watched. I watched the clock on my laptop click past midnight, then 1 a.m., then 2. The motel room was silent, except for the rattling air conditioner and the pounding of my own heart. I'd bought a bag of stale pretzels from the vending machine down the hall. That was my dinner. I didn't care. I was hunting. On the glowing laptop screen, the house was dark. Mostly. The garage camera showed Mitch had finally passed out on his filthy mattress, a half-empty beer can still clutched in his hand. The master bedroom camera, Sarah's room, was dark. The kitchen was empty. But the living room camera, that one was active. Emily was asleep, or at least pretending to be, on the air mattress shoved in the corner of the room. She was just a small, still lump under a thin blanket. But Jason and Deborah were awake. They were sitting close together on the sofa, my sofa in the dark. The only light came from the blue, flickering glow of the muted television. They were talking. And because of the high-sensitivity microphone in that USB charger I'd plugged in behind the TV, I could hear every single poisonous word. She's too weak, Deborah whispered, her voice a low, raspy hiss. I watched her take a long drag from a cigarette, the cherry glowing bright orange in the dark. Smoking. Smoking in my house after I'd spent a month airing it out. She cried for an hour after you took that check, Deborah continued. She'll get over it, Jason muttered. He sounded annoyed. She always does. She's soft. That's not the point, Jason, Deborah snapped, her voice sharp. The point is that $3,000 a month is nothing. It's pocket change. It barely pays for my hair and Mitch's beer. It doesn't solve our real problems. She leaned in. The real money is in the walls. It's in the land. It is this house. My stomach tightened into a cold knot. You have to get the house, Deborah commanded. I'm working on it, Mom, Jason hissed back, clearly agitated. It's not that simple. The old man, Bill, he's a problem. He's sniffing around. His little visit yesterday, that wasn't just a friendly drop-in. He was marking his territory. And Emily? What about Emily? She's terrified of him, Jason said. If I push her too hard, she'll run right to him. He hates me. You know he hates me. He'd find a way to stop it. Then you have to hurry up, Deborah said. I watched her stub out her cigarette on a china plate left on the coffee table. Sarah's china. You have to do it before he comes back this weekend. Did you get the papers like I told you? Of course I got the papers, Jason said indignantly. He reached down beside the sofa and pulled up a worn leather briefcase. I watched him snap it open. He pulled out a thick stack of documents neatly folded. It's all here, he whispered, and I could hear the note of smug pride in his voice. I had my lawyer draft them last week. This one, he tapped the top document, is the durable power of attorney. It gives me control of all her finances, the trust check, her bank accounts, everything. Good. And the other one? Deborah asked impatiently. This, Jason said, holding up the second document, is the backup plan, just in case she fights back. I leaned so close to the laptop screen my nose was almost touching it. I clicked the zoom function. The camera wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. I could read the cover sheet. My blood turned to ice. I read the words clearly, petition for conservatorship. Conservatorship. My mind reeled. That wasn't just stealing. That was something else entirely. That was taking away her life, her rights, her freedom, the way you hear about those celebrities being trapped by their own families. They weren't just planning to rob my daughter. They were planning to erase her. I sat there breathless, my heart hammering against my ribs. I heard Deborah on the audio feed. She let out a low, satisfied laugh. A conservatorship. Jason, you are smart. She paused. And what's the plan? How do you get the little princess to sign her kingdom away? Jason smiled back. I saw it on the screen. It was the smile of a predator, all teeth. That's the easy part, he said, tapping the papers. I'll tell her they're business loan documents. You know, for my project. I'll tell her it's just a formality for the bank, that we're putting the house up as collateral for our future. And she'll sign. She'll sign, Jason said with chilling certainty. She won't even read the fine print. She trusts me. And once she signs, Jason whispered, I have full control. I own her, and I own this house. I kept listening. My heart was a heavy, cold stone in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Conservatorship. The word echoed in the cheap motel room. They weren't just planning to steal her money. They were planning to steal her life. On the laptop screen, I heard Deborah laugh, a dry, rasping sound like sandpaper. Good, she hissed. Once you have that power of attorney, you mortgage this house immediately. That night. Don't wait. This place? She looked around the living room. It's new. Good land. It's worth at least $1 million, maybe more. You can easily pull $500,000 out of it. 500,000, Jason. Think of it. 500. Jason's voice was greedy, excited. But what do we do with it? We pay off Mitch's gambling debts, Deborah said, her voice low and conspiratorial. That bookie in Joliet is going to break his legs if we don't. And we'll finally have real seed money for your project. We'll be set. We'll be rich. I'd built a fortress, and I'd handed the keys to the enemy. I know, Jason said. I heard the sound of him pacing on the living room floor. But Mom, what if Emily finds out? What if she sees the bank statements? What if she finally tells the old man? Tell me, Emily. Tell me. I'm right here. I'm watching. There was a long pause. I watched the screen as Deborah leaned forward on the sofa. The blue light from the muted television illuminated her face, making her look like a ghoul. She smiled. It was the coldest, cruelest smile I had ever seen. That, she whispered, is what the other paper is for you, idiot. The conservatorship. Jason's voice was hesitant. Exactly, she hissed back, clearly enjoying her own brilliance. The power of attorney is plan A. That gets us the money fast. The conservatorship is plan B. It's the insurance policy. It's how we keep the money and shut her up permanently. I felt sick. I wanted to vomit all over the stained motel carpet. Think about it, Deborah continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. The girl is a wreck. We all see it. She cries all day. She barely eats. She's depressed. It's perfect. But that's because we're making her. Shut up, Deborah snapped. It doesn't matter why. It only matters that it's true. When she finds out about the mortgage and runs to her daddy, you file the petition. You go to the judge. You tell the court that your poor sweet wife is unstable. No, they wouldn't. You tell them. Deborah's voice was filled with venom, that she's suffering from severe debilitating depression ever since her mother died. That she's mentally unfit to make her own decisions. That she's a danger to herself. My God, Mom, Gary and I will testify, Deborah said, ignoring him. We'll tell the court how we had to Hussein in to take care of her because she couldn't even feed herself. We'll say she's paranoid, that she's having delusions. Mitch will testify. The court will see a grieving, unstable woman and a loving, concerned husband. They'll grant the conservatorship to you, Jason. Her husband. And once you're her legal guardian, Jason's voice was filled with a terrible, dawning awe. She can't testify against me. She can't access the bank accounts. She can't hire a lawyer. She can't do anything without my permission. Exactly, Deborah cackled. And that old man, her father Bill, he won't be able to do a damn thing. He'll have no legal standing. It will be your word against his, and you'll be the loving husband taking care of your sick wife. We'll have everything, the house, the trust fund, and she'll be trapped, powerless. This wasn't just an invasion. This wasn't just theft. This was a conspiracy, a cold, calculated plan to erase my daughter. They were going to use my love, the house I built for her, as a cage. They were going to exploit her grief for Sarah, twist it, and use it as a weapon to have her declared mentally incompetent, just to steal her property. I couldn't watch anymore. I couldn't listen. I slammed the laptop shut. The screen went black, plunging the motel room into pitch darkness, but I could still see their smiling, ghoulish faces burned into my retinas. I sat there, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The silence of the room was deafening, broken only by the rattle of the cheap air conditioner. They had pushed me. They had insulted my wife's memory. They had abused my daughter. And now they were planning to destroy her. I stood up. The cheap vinyl chair scraped loudly against the linoleum floor. You want a war, I whispered into the darkness. You want to fight a contractor in a house he built. I grabbed my truck keys from the nightstand. You're going to get one. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just sat in that stiff vinyl chair in the dark, the motel's bleach smell stinging my nostrils, and I watched. I watched the laptop screen until the battery died around 4 in the morning. I sat in the dark in that cheap, sour-smelling room. I didn't feel rage anymore. That was gone. What I felt was the cold, hard clarity of a contractor looking at a blueprint. The plan was crystal clear. It was a foundation plan, a structural plan, and I was the general contractor. At 6 a.m., just as the sun was turning the gray sky over the interstate to a dirty metallic pink, I picked up my phone. I didn't call the police. This wasn't a job for a cop. This was a job for an architect, a legal architect. I dialed a number I knew by heart, a number I hadn't called in 6 months. Mark Jenkins. He wasn't just my lawyer for 30 years. He was the man who helped me build the fortress that was now occupied by the enemy. He answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly with sleep. Art. It's 6 in the morning. Are you okay? Is it your heart? My heart's fine, Mark, I said, my voice low and steady. But I'm about to give someone else a heart attack. Listen closely. I don't have much time. Okay, he said. I heard the sound of him sitting up in bed, instantly alert. I'm listening. Mark, I said, do you remember the Irrevocable Real Estate Trust? We set up for Emily's house the Sarah Carter Trust. There was a pause. I heard the click of a lamp on his end. The Sarah Carter Trust. Of course, Art. I drafted it. The one where you're the sole trust protector. Why, what's wrong? I looked out the motel window at the rusted-out car in the parking lot. I'm at a Motel 6 in Peoria. I've been watching a live feed from inside the house for the last 18 hours. My God. Art, what did you find? I found them, I said. They're all in there. The whole parasitic family. Jason, his mother, his father, his deadbeat brother. Clause 4A, violation of occupancy. Mark started already thinking like a lawyer. Forget 4A, Mark. This is bigger. I cut him off. This is exactly what Sarah was afraid of. Do you remember Clause 7B? Another pause. Longer this time. I heard him rustling papers even over the phone. Clause 7B. He repeated, his voice suddenly sharp, excited. The beneficiary duress clause. In the event the primary beneficiary, Emily Anderson, is found to be under financial duress, manipulation, coercion, or physical abuse. The trust protector. I continued, finishing the sentence we had crafted together, has the sole and absolute power to immediately remove her as trustee and revoke all rights of occupancy for any and all parties residing in the property. Holy hell, Art, Mark whispered. You're not telling me. Did you get proof? I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. Mark, I have 12 hours of digital video. I have proof of them treating her like a slave, documented with a chore chart. That's duress. I have video of Jason and his mother stealing her $3,000 trust check from her hands, right out of the mail. That's financial manipulation. And Mark, I said, saving the best for last. I have a 2-hour conversation from last night on high-definition audio of Jason and Deborah planning to have Emily sign a durable power of attorney under false pretenses. That's felony conspiracy to commit fraud. And I finished, my voice like ice. I have them planning to file a petition for conservatorship, to have her declared mentally incompetent, using her grief over Sarah's death as the reason so they can mortgage the house for $500,000 and cover Mitch's gambling debts. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. For a full 10 seconds. I just heard Mark breathing. Finally, he spoke. His voice was no longer sleepy. It was the voice of the shark I paid him to be. Oh my God, Art. They're not just parasites. They're criminals. Yes, I said. They are. And they're in my house. They're in Sarah's house. They threw her picture on the floor, Mark. Art, they're sleeping in her bed. And they're planning to use her memory to destroy our daughter. This ends today. This was the payoff. This was the reason I built the house this way. I never trusted Jason. Sarah, in her final days, begged me not to give Emily the house outright. "He'll take it from her, Art," she'd said, her voice thin as paper. "He'll bleed her dry and leave her with nothing." So Mark and I built this fortress. We made the house an irrevocable trust. It's an asset that cannot be touched by creditors or by a divorce. It didn't belong to Emily. It belonged to the trust. Emily was the beneficiary. She got to live there rent-free for life. We also made her the trustee so she could manage the property taxes and insurance herself. She thought that meant she owned it. That was the cover story. That's what Jason believed. He thought he had married a property owner, but he didn't know about the secret failsafe. He didn't know about the trust protector. Me, as the protector. I had one job: to protect the trust's asset, the house, and the beneficiary, Emily. Clause 7B was my nuclear option. If the beneficiary Emily was ever found to be under duress or unable to protect the asset, which she clearly was, I had the absolute power to step in, fire her as trustee, and evict everyone to protect the house. Jason thought he was playing chess with my daughter. He didn't realize he was playing against a grandmaster who had built the damn board. And I was about to flip it over. "What do you need, Art? Tell me." Mark said, his voice pulling me back. "I need the paperwork," I said. "I need the official revocation of Emily's trustee status citing Clause 7B. I need the legal eviction notice effective immediately. And I need a restraining order against Jason and his entire family, keeping them 500 feet away from Emily and that property." "And you," Mark said, "what are you going to do?" "I'm going to shower," I said. "I'm going to put on a clean shirt. I'm going to finish my cold coffee. Then I'm going to drive over there. I'll be there in 2 hours. I want you to meet me there." "Don't go alone, Art. They sound dangerous. What if that Mitch character gets violent?" "I'm not going alone," I said. "I'm bringing you. And Mark, bring help, not cops, private. I don't want them arrested yet. I want them humiliated. I want them thrown out on their asses. I'll hire 2 off-duty officers, armed and in suits," Mark said. "It'll cost you." "I don't care what it costs," I said, looking at the dirty motel walls. "This is Sarah's money. It's time to use it to clean house. I'm tearing the building down." "I'll see you in 3 hours," Mark said. "I'll have the papers drafted, notarized, and ready to serve. I'll have the security." "Art, I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, Mark," I said, hanging up the phone. "Be angry." I stood up. I felt the ache in my 70-year-old back from the terrible chair. But I also felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years, not since Sarah died. I felt strong. I wasn't a grieving old man anymore. I wasn't a victim. I was a contractor. And I had a demolition job to do. I drove back. I didn't park in the trees this time. I didn't sneak in the back. I drove my F-150 right up the driveway past the rusted-out Winnebago that was still leaking oil onto my grass, and I parked it right in front of the porch, blocking the main walkway. I left the engine running for a moment, the diesel rumble a low growl that vibrated the front windows. Then I killed it. I didn't grab my hammer this time. I didn't need it. I had Mark Jenkins. I walked up the steps, my boots heavy on the cedar planks. The front door was as usual unlocked. I didn't knock. I pushed it open and walked in. It was 11 in the morning. The house smelled like stale beer and microwaved breakfast sandwiches. The scene was almost identical to the one I'd left. It was like a photograph of their dysfunction. In the living room, the television was blaring a morning talk show. Deborah and Gary were parked on the sofa, coffee cups in hand, looking like they hadn't moved since yesterday. Mitch was at the dining table shoveling cereal into his mouth, his undershirt stained. And my daughter, Emily, was on her hands and knees by the entryway scrubbing a muddy footprint that Mitch had probably left. They all looked up when I entered. Jason, hearing my boots, came running out of the kitchen, a piece of toast in his hand. He stopped dead when he saw me. He was expecting me to be halfway to Chicago talking to a cardiologist. "Dad." "Art," he stammered, trying to muster his fake smile. His eyes were wide with panic. You're back early. What did the doctor say? Is your heart okay?" I ignored him. I looked right past him, right past the parasites on my sofa, and I looked at my daughter. She was frozen on the floor. Rag in hand, her eyes wide with that familiar, terrible fear. "Emily," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used on a job site just before the final inspection. "Go upstairs. Pack a bag with your essentials. Right now. You're leaving with me." The entire room stopped breathing. Emily looked from me to Jason, her face pale. Deborah was the first to find her voice. She shot up from the sofa, her face turning a blotchy red. She muted the TV and the sudden silence was deafening. "You crazy old fool!" she shrieked, pointing a finger at me. "What do you think you're doing? You can't just barge in here and give orders. You have no right. This is my son's house, Emily's house." Jason, seeing his mother take the lead, found his courage. He stepped in front of me, trying to be intimidating, puffing out his chest. "She's right, Art. I think you're overreacting. This is Emily's house, which means it's my house. You are just a guest, and you're not welcome to start trouble." I looked at him. I looked at his puffed-up chest, his weak eyes, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who just checked the blueprints and knows exactly which wall isn't load-bearing. "Really?" I said, my voice soft. "This is your house?" "That's right," Jason said, feeling bold. "Then you should probably call the cops," I said, leaning in just a fraction, "because there are strangers in my house, and I'm about to have them removed." Jason's smug look faltered. "What? What are you talking about, old man? You're not making sense." "I'm talking about this," I said, right on cue, as if we had rehearsed it. The front door swung open again. A man in a $3,000 Italian suit stepped in. It was Mark Jenkins. He was tall, sharp, and had the eyes of a shark. He carried a fine leather briefcase. Behind him, two other men filed in. They were not lawyers. They were huge. Both were over 6'5", built like brick walls, wearing black suits, white shirts, and earpieces. They positioned themselves on either side of the doorway, folding their arms. They didn't just look like security. They looked like the kind of men who tear doors off hinges for a living. The room went absolutely dead silent. The only sound was the click of Mark Jenkins snapping open his briefcase. He looked around the room, his gaze landing on the filth, the lazy occupants, and finally on Jason and Deborah. "Good morning," Mark said, his voice smooth and professional, filling the silent room. "My name is Mark Jenkins. I am legal counsel for the Sarah Carter Trust." He pulled out a stack of documents. "I'm looking for a Mr. Jason Miller and a Mrs. Deborah Miller." Jason and Deborah froze. They stared at Mark, then at the two mountains of men he had brought with him. Gary and Mitch at the dining table looked up from their TV, their mouths open. Emily was still cowering by the kitchen door, watching me, her eyes wide with terror, not understanding what was happening. The two security guards stood impassively by the door, blocking the only exit. They didn't look like security. They looked like the kind of men who tear doors off hinges for a living. Mark Jenkins didn't wait. He stepped forward into the center of the living room, placing his fine leather briefcase on the coffee table. He snapped it open with two sharp clicks that echoed in the dead silence. "Good morning," Mark said again, his voice smooth, professional, and absolutely lethal. "My name is Mark Jenkins. I am the legal representative for the Sarah Carter Trust." He looked directly at Deborah, then at Jason. "Which is the sole legal owner of this property?" Jason's panic turned to confusion, then to a strange, misplaced arrogance. He actually laughed, a short, nervous bark. "What Sarah Carter Trust?" What the hell are you talking about? You've got the wrong house, buddy. He pointed at Emily, who flinched. This house is in her name. Emily's name. My wife, right, honey? He looked at her, demanding confirmation. Mark didn't even look at Emily. He looked at Jason. Wrong, Mark said. The word was flat. Final. That is a very common, and in this case, a very costly misunderstanding. This $1 million property does not and has never belonged to Emily. It belongs to the Sarah Carter Irrevocable Trust. Jason's laugh died in his throat. A trust? What are you talking about? I saw the paperwork when we moved in. It said she was the owner. It said she was the trustee. Mark corrected, his voice like a scalpel. The manager, the caretaker. She is the beneficiary, yes, meaning she gets to use the asset. But she only holds the title of trustee on one condition. Mark paused, letting the legal term hang in the air, a word Jason clearly didn't understand. That she fulfills her fiduciary duty to protect the asset, a duty she has quite spectacularly failed to perform. Jason looked baffled out of his depth. Fiduciary? What? That's just lawyer talk. You can't just... He can, I said, stepping forward. It was my turn. I pointed up at the corner of the ceiling where the black USB charger was plugged in, its tiny blue indicator light glowing innocently. And this, I said, my voice low, is how she protected it. Their eyes followed my finger. And that one, I pointed to the kitchen where another charger was plugged in near the sink. And that one in the hallway. I looked up the stairs toward my wife's desecrated bedroom. And Deborah? The digital alarm clock currently sitting on your nightstand. Deborah's face went from blotchy red to a sickly pale white. She instinctively looked toward the stairs, her hand flying to her throat. You spied on us. You bugged us. That's illegal. We'll sue you. Illegal, I barked, cutting her off with a sharp laugh. You're trespassing on a property owned by a trust that I control. I can install whatever I want to protect my asset. And I'm so glad I did, because I heard some fascinating things. I looked at Deborah. You were right about one thing. Emily is weak. Too weak to stand up to parasites like you who call her a useless thing while she's scrubbing your mess. Then I turned my eyes on Jason. And you were right about me. I'm just an old man, sniffing around, losing my mental faculties. I believe that was the phrase you used, the clueless old fool who was just in the way. I never said that. Jason stammered, his eyes wide with panic. You're twisting things. You're senile, you're crazy. Emily, tell him. Am I? I looked at Mark. Mark, show them how crazy I am. Mark didn't miss a beat. He pulled an iPad Pro from his briefcase. He tapped the screen. The glass reflected the terrified faces in the room. He turned it to face Jason and Deborah. I believe this recording was made, Mark said, checking his watch, at approximately 2:17 a.m. this morning, in this very room. From that camera right there. He pointed to the USB charger behind the TV. He pressed play. The speakers on the iPad were powerful. Jason's own voice, low and conspiratorial, filled the living room. Video Jason. I'm working on it, Mom. But the old man, Bill, he's a problem. He's sniffing around. Emily's terrified of him. Jason froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at his mother, whose face was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. She knew what came next. On the screen, the video continued. Deborah's hissing voice joined in. Video, Deborah. Then you have to hurry up. Did you get the papers like I told you, fast? Video Jason. It's all here. This one is the durable power of attorney. This is the petition for conservatorship. I watched my daughter Emily. She was still by the kitchen door, covering her mouth, her eyes fixed on the screen. She was finally understanding. The fog of abuse was clearing. Mark let the video play. He let the most damning part fill the room, the part I had listened to in the dark motel room. Video Deborah. That is what the other paper is for, you idiot. You go to the judge. You tell them. She's suffering from severe, debilitating depression ever since her mother died. That she's mentally unfit to make her own decisions. Video Jason, but that's because we're making her. Video Deborah. Shut up. It doesn't matter why, it only matters that it's true. We'll all testify. The court will grant the conservatorship to you, Jason, her husband. And that old man, her father, he won't be able to do a damn thing. Mark pressed pause. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavier than any concrete I had ever poured. Even Mitch had stopped chewing his cereal, his spoon halfway to his mouth. Jason's face was white, ashen. He looked like a man who had just seen his own ghost. Deborah was shaking her lipstick-smeared mouth, opening and closing silently, no sound coming out. Gary looked like he was about to be sick all over the dining table. They were trapped. The old senile, clueless man they had mocked and planned to destroy had just shown them the blueprints to their own prison. They realized in that one horrifying moment that they had been gamed. They had been outmaneuvered. They had been caught. The foundation of their entire parasitic plan had just crumbled beneath them. Jason and Deborah froze. They stared at Mark, then at the 2 mountains of men he had brought with him. Gary and Mitch at the dining table looked up from their TV, their mouths open. Emily was still cowering by the kitchen door, watching me, her eyes wide with terror, not understanding what was happening. The 2 security guards stood impassively by the door, blocking the only exit. They didn't look like security. They looked like the kind of men who tear doors off hinges for a living. Mark Jenkins didn't let them recover. He didn't give them a moment to think, to build a new lie. He pressed stop on the iPad, the sudden silence as loud as the accusations. He turned from the screen to the parasites. As you can see, Mark said, his voice cutting through the room, we have irrefutable proof. He began to tick off the points on his fingers, a legal executioner counting the charges. 1, systematic domestic servitude and labor abuse against the beneficiary Emily Anderson. He gestured to Emily, who was still standing by the kitchen, her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide, finally understanding. 2, willful financial malfeasance. Mark's eyes bored into Jason. Specifically, the theft of the $3,000 monthly trust fund check, which we have on video, you handing directly to your mother. Deborah flinched, her hand instinctively going to her robe pocket. And 3, Mark said, his voice dropping. Conspiracy to commit felony fraud, including the fabrication of documents. This power of attorney and this petition for conservatorship with the express intent to defraud the beneficiary and seize the assets of the Sarah Carter Trust. He let that hang in the air. Jason looked like he was going to throw up. Mark then turned his gaze not unkindly to my daughter. Emily, he said, his voice softening slightly. I am truly sorry about this, but you must understand that as trustee, your primary sole duty was to protect the asset this house. You have failed to do so. Emily shrunk back. I didn't know. I know, Mark said, which is why you are a victim. But the trust must be protected. Therefore, as stipulated in Clause 7b of the trust agreement, abuse of beneficiary, your father, William Anderson, as the sole trust protector, has this morning signed this document. He held up a fresh sheet of paper with my signature, William Bill Anderson, scrawled at the bottom. This document, Mark declared, officially revokes your status as trustee effective immediately. And for your own safety and to protect the asset, it temporarily revokes your right of occupancy. Emily gasped, but I held up a hand. Wait, kid. Trust me." Mark then turned his sharp, cold gaze back to the 5 invaders. "Jason, Deborah, Gary, Mitch. Which means," he said, his voice booming in the living room, "that none of you, not as family, not as guests, not as spouses, have any legal right to be on this property. You are, as of this exact second, trespassing." He placed the eviction notice on the coffee table. "You have 10 minutes to gather your personal essential belongings and vacate the premises. After 10 minutes, you will be removed by force, and anything left behind will be considered abandoned property and disposed of." 10 minutes. It was brutal. It was beautiful. The silence broke. It wasn't Jason who spoke. It was Deborah. She exploded. It was like a rusty pipe bursting. 10 minutes! She shrieked, her voice cracking. "You can't do this. You can't throw us out. This is my son's house. This is Emily's house. We're her family. We'll call the police. I'll tell them this old man is crazy, that you're harassing us." She was still playing the game. She still thought she had leverage. She still thought Emily had the power. Jason, seeing his mother fight, found his voice. "Yeah, you can't. Emily, tell them you want us here? Tell your father to stop this. It's your house, Emily. Tell him." Emily was just sobbing, shaking her head, unable to speak. Deborah saw her chance. She pointed a trembling, red-nailed finger at me. "See, she wants us here. You're the one who's not welcome." "Old man, get out of my daughter-in-law's house." That was it. That was the last straw. I had been silent. I had let my lawyer do the talking. I had let the video do the talking. Now it was my turn. I walked slowly, deliberately past Mark, past the sofa where Deborah was still screeching. I walked to the solid oak front door. I put my hand on the handle. I turned it. I pulled the door wide open, letting the bright, cold morning air flood the filthy, dark room. I turned around. I faced all of them. Deborah, Gary, Mitch, Jason. I looked right into Deborah's furious, contorted face, and I said the 3 words I had been waiting all night to say. The 3 words this entire situation demanded. "Get out now." It wasn't a yell. It was a command. It was the voice of the owner, the voice of the contractor, the voice of the father who had finally come to collect. Deborah lost her mind. With a scream of pure rage, she lunged at me. "You can't make me—" She never made it 2 feet. The larger of the 2 security guards, the one who looked like a refrigerator, stepped forward with impossible speed. He didn't grab her. He just put one massive suit-covered arm out. Deborah ran right into it like it was a steel I-beam. She bounced back, stumbling over the coffee table, collapsing onto the sofa in a heap of rage and surprise. The other guard stepped toward Gary and Mitch. 10 minutes, he said, his voice like gravel. "Starts now. Move." That broke the spell. The fantasy was over. Reality had arrived. Gary and Mitch scrambled. They looked at each other in panic, and then ran past me out the door toward their RV. They knew a lost cause when they saw one. Deborah was hysterical, screaming and crying on the sofa. "My things, my clothes, my pictures." "You have 9 minutes, Mark said, looking at his watch. She shrieked again and ran up the stairs back to Sarah's room. Jason was the last to move. He was staring at Emily, his face a mask of disbelief. "Emily, you're letting him do this. After everything, you're choosing him." I watched my daughter. This was her moment. Emily, still crying, looked at him, and for the first time I saw the fear in her eyes replaced by something else. Disgust. She didn't say a word. She just turned her back on him and walked over to stand behind me. That was his answer. The next 5 minutes were chaos. Deborah running down the stairs, throwing armloads of clothes into a garbage bag. Gary and Mitch frantically tossing trash out of the Winnebago to make space. Jason, finally realizing it was over, just grabbed his briefcase and his laptop, his face ashen. They filed out one by one, a pathetic parade of parasites, walking past me, past the guards, onto the lawn. They stood there, a miserable pile of luggage and people on the muddy tracks their RV had dug into my lawn. I stood in the doorway. I looked at Deborah. I looked at Jason. I said nothing else. I just slammed the solid oak door. The sound echoed through the house. It was the sound of a vault closing. It was the sound of me, William Anderson, taking my house back. The thud of the solid oak door echoed in the sudden cavernous silence of the living room. It was over. The noise, the shouting, the parasites were gone. The only sound in the room was a small, high-pitched keening. It was the sound of a spring wound so tight it was about to break, finally letting go. I turned around. My daughter Emily was still standing where she had been frozen halfway between the kitchen and me. Her hands were still clasped in front of her mouth. Her eyes, which had been wide with terror, now seemed to lose their focus. Her entire body began to tremble, not with fear, but with shock. "Emily," I said, taking a step toward her. She collapsed. She didn't faint. She just folded. Her legs gave out, and she crumpled onto the hardwood floor I had polished, dissolving into a fit of desperate, gut-wrenching sobs. It was the most terrible sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a dam breaking. I rushed to her, kneeling on the floor, my old knees screaming in protest. I pulled her into my arms. She was limp like a rag doll, but she clung to me, burying her face into the fabric of my work shirt, her tears soaking through to my skin. "It's okay, honey," I whispered, my voice rough. "It's over. They're gone. You're safe." "I'm sorry, Dad," she wailed, her words muffled against my chest. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do. I... Shh. It's not your fault." "It is," she cried, pulling back to look at me, her face a mess of tears and mascara. "I was so scared, Dad. I was so scared he would leave me. He told me. He told me if I didn't do what his mother said, if I made trouble, he would leave me. He said I was weak, that no one else would ever want me. He said I'd be all alone, that I wouldn't have anyone, not even you." My heart broke. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. It wasn't just a house they were stealing. They had been systematically dismantling my daughter's mind, isolating her, convincing her she was worthless, that this abusive, parasitic coward was her only option. They had used her love and her loyalty as a weapon against her. I pulled her tight, rocking her like I did when she was a child who had scraped her knee. "Listen to me," I said, my voice thick. "A man who makes you choose between him and your family, a man who tells you you're worthless, that's not a man. That's a bully. And he doesn't deserve you, Emily. He is not worth a single one of your tears." I held her head in my calloused hands. "You are not alone. You hear me, you have me. You are safe now." A sudden violent pounding on the front window made us both jump. Outside on the porch was Jason. His face was pressed against the glass, his features twisted in a mask of desperation. Deborah was behind him, screaming, her face purple with rage, but I couldn't hear her words through the thick glass. "Emily!" Jason yelled, his voice muffled but clear. "Emily, open the door. Don't let him do this. He's crazy. He's trying to control you. It's our house, Emily. Tell him you want me here. Tell him—" I started to get up, my anger flaring again. But Emily moved first. She pulled away from me. She stood up on shaky legs. She looked at me then, at the 2 massive security guards who were standing like statues by the door. She looked at Mark Jenkins, who was calmly checking his phone. Then she walked to the window. Jason saw her coming, and his face lit up in a desperate, hopeful smile. "Yes, honey. That's it. Tell him to leave. It's our—" Emily put her hand flat on the glass right in front of his face. She wasn't crying anymore. Her face was pale, her eyes were red and swollen, but the fear was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, quiet anger I had never seen in her. It was my anger. "Don't touch me," she whispered, her voice low and shaking, but not with fear, with rage. I heard the video, Jason. Jason's smile froze. You were going to have me declared incompetent, she asked, her voice breaking on the last word. You were going to tell a judge I was crazy, so you could steal my house, my mother's house. Jason just stared at her. His mouth opened and closed. He had no more lies. He knew in that instant that he had lost. He hadn't just lost the house. He had lost her. He had been completely and totally exposed. He stumbled back from the window as if she had slapped him. That was all I needed to see. My daughter had found her footing. It was time for me to take out the trash. I walked to the front door, unlocked the deadbolt, and pulled it open. The noise of Deborah's screaming hit us. Call the police, I'll have you arrested for kidnapping. I stepped out onto the porch. Mark and the 2 guards right behind me. Your 10 minutes are up, I said. I looked past Deborah, past Gary, who was just standing there uselessly, and looked at Mitch, who was trying to load my tools into the back of the RV. Hey, I yelled. Drop it! That's not yours! Then I pointed to the rusted Winnebago. You have exactly 10 minutes to get that piece of junk off my property before I call the sheriff to have it impounded, and then call a towing company to have it dragged to a scrapyard and crushed into a cube. Mitch dropped my drill. I finally turned to Jason. He was standing on the lawn, looking utterly defeated. And you, I said, this is the last time you will ever speak to my daughter. This is the last time you will ever set foot on this property. Mark Jenkins, my lawyer, will be in contact with you about the divorce. If you or any member of your family come within 500 feet of Emily, we will have you arrested. Do you understand me? He just stared at me, his eyes dead. I roared, do you understand me? He flinched and nodded a tiny, pathetic movement. I watched them, a miserable, defeated little group. Deborah had finally stopped screaming. She was just staring. They scrambled into the RV, the shame and fury rolling off them in waves. I heard the engine crank once, twice, then finally catch with a puff of thick, black, oily smoke. The RV lurched forward, driving off my lawn, leaving 2 deep, muddy scars in the beautiful green grass. I stood on the porch, my daughter standing silently beside me, and I watched them drive down that gravel road until they were nothing but a small, pathetic speck in the distance. We left the house that day. I left Mark and his security team to lock the place down, to change the locks, to put up the no trespassing signs. I just took my daughter. I put her in the passenger seat of my F-150, buckled her in like she was a little girl again, and I drove. I drove the 3 hours back to my house in Chicago, the one I had shared with Sarah, the one Emily grew up in. She didn't say a word the entire ride. She just stared out the window, her hands clutched in her lap, as if she was watching a movie of the last 5 years play out on the passing cornfields. When we got home, I led her up to her old bedroom. It was still painted the same pale yellow she had chosen when she was 16. I put her bag on the bed. You rest, I told her. You're safe here. She slept for almost 24 hours straight. It wasn't just sleep, it was a collapse. The kind of shutdown that happens when a body has been running on pure adrenaline and terror for too long. The country house was locked up. It was a crime scene. Mark had an inventory done, and we hired a deep cleaning crew to fumigate and scrub the filth left by those people. My tools, my beautiful Milwaukee tools, were a write-off. Mitch had destroyed them, leaving them out caked in God knows what. I told the crew to just throw them away. They were tainted. But I wasn't focused on the house. I was focused on Emily. The next week, I took her to a therapist. Not just any therapist. Mark recommended a specialist, a doctor. Aris, a woman who dealt with survivors of domestic abuse and high-control relationships. I sat with Emily in that first session. I needed to hear it too. Emily just sat there, small and silent, staring at her hands. Emily, Dr. Aris said, her voice kind but firm. What you experienced wasn't just a bad marriage. It was coercive control. It was financial abuse. It was psychological manipulation. She gave a name to the horror. She explained how Jason and his family had used a classic abuser's playbook: isolate the victim, move her to a remote house, control the finances, steal her trust fund check, undermine her self-worth, call her useless, lazy, stupid, and finally instill fear, the threat of abandonment. I watched my daughter as she listened. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. It wasn't just understanding. It was validation. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't weak. She was a victim. While Emily was in her sessions, I was in mine, with Mark Jenkins. We sat in his high-rise office in the Loop. I handed him the laptop and the hard drive where I had downloaded all 12 hours of video. "I want them gone, Mark," I said. "I want them out of her life, forever." Mark just smiled. "Art," he said, "this isn't just a divorce case. This is a demolition." He was ruthless. He didn't just file for divorce. He filed for an emergency restraining order for Emily, attaching a 2-minute highlight reel of the video evidence: Deborah screaming, Jason snatching the check, and the late-night conversation about the conservatorship. A judge saw it. He signed the order immediately. Jason and his entire family were legally barred from coming within 500 feet of Emily or me. Then Mark filed for the divorce. It was, I'm told, the shortest divorce negotiation in Illinois history. Mark sent Jason's new court-appointed lawyer a private password-protected link to the full 12 hours of video. The subject line was simple: Exhibit A. Jason and Deborah didn't fight. They couldn't. Mark made it clear that if they contested anything, alimony, division of assets, anything at all, he would hand-deliver the hard drive not to a divorce judge but to the district attorney. He explained that conspiracy to commit fraud against a vulnerable person and elder abuse, since they were trying to defraud me too, carried significant prison time. They folded. Instantly. They agreed to the divorce. They agreed to no assets, no alimony. They agreed to sign a non-disclosure agreement promising to never speak about Emily or me again in exchange for us not pressing criminal charges. It was over. Legally, at least. I heard through the grapevine my cousin knows a guy who knows a guy in their old neighborhood. What happened to them? Without Emily's $3,000 check, without the free house, without my money to siphon, the whole parasitic structure imploded. Mitch's bookie in Joliet finally came to collect. Last I heard, Gary and Deborah were living permanently in that rusted-out Winnebago, parked in a trailer park somewhere near the Indiana border. They were broke, and they had turned on each other, blaming Jason for everything. 3 months passed. It was spring in Chicago. The snow melted. I watched the color return to my daughter's face. The therapy was working. She stopped apologizing every time she entered a room. She stopped flinching when I raised my voice to cheer for the Cubs on TV. She started to exist again. One evening we were sitting on my back porch, the one Sarah and I built. The air was cool. She had been quiet for a long time, just watching the sunset paint the skyline. "Dad," she said, her voice quiet but strong. Strong in a way I hadn't heard in years. "Yeah, honey, I've been thinking." She turned to look at me. The fear was gone. Her eyes were clear. I saw Sarah in them. I think I want to go back to the house. The country house." My heart dropped. "Emily, you don't have to." "I know," she said, cutting me off gently. "I don't have to. I want to. It's still my house. It's Mom's house. I let them defile it. I let them push me out." She stood up, looking out at the city. "I want to go back, Dad. But this time, I want to do it right. I want to learn how to be strong enough to protect it. I want you to teach me." I looked at my daughter. My strong, beautiful daughter. She wasn't broken. She was forged. "Okay, honey," I said, standing up beside her. "Okay, let's go home." 6 months passed. 6 months of hard work, not just for me, but for Emily. We didn't go back to the country house right away. I had it professionally sanitized. I mean down to the studs. I ripped out the carpets in the master bedroom, Sarah's room, because I couldn't get the smell of Deborah's cheap cigarettes out. I replaced them with new hardwood, the same oak as the rest of the floor. I repainted. I installed a new security system, one that I could monitor from my phone in Chicago. The scars on the zoysia lawn took time to heal. I had to reseed and water them every week. But grass-like people can recover if you give it a chance. Emily worked even harder. She went to therapy twice a week. Dr. Aris was a miracle worker. She helped my daughter rebuild her sense of self, piece by piece. Emily learned to identify manipulation. She learned to set boundaries. She learned to say no. It was the most beautiful construction project I had ever witnessed. Mark Jenkins had finalized the divorce. It was clean. It was brutal. Jason, facing the video evidence and the threat of criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy, didn't get a dime. He signed everything, gave up all claims, and vanished along with his parasitic family. Today, we were back. I parked my F-150 in the driveway. The lawn was green again. The house was clean. It was silent. It was ours. Emily and I walked through the rooms. She was quiet, thoughtful. She walked into the master bedroom, her hand trailing along the freshly painted wall. She looked at the new hardwood floors. She walked over to the window, Sarah's window, and looked out at the lake. "It smells good in here," she said, her voice soft. "It smells like new wood and paint. It smells like you, Dad." I smiled. "It's clean, honey. It's safe." "I brought something," I said. We went outside. In the truck bed, battered but alive, was the Meyer lemon tree I had bought 6 months ago. Its leaves were a little yellow, but it was still fighting. "I kept it watered at home," I said. "Figured it was time to plant it." Before we did, Mark Jenkins arrived. He wasn't in his sharkskin suit today, just jeans and a polo shirt. He had one last document for us to sign right there on the hood of my truck. "This is the amended trust agreement," he explained, handing Emily a pen. I had Mark rewrite the rules. The house was still the property of the Sarah Carter Trust. Emily was being reinstated as the official trustee. That was important for her. It showed I trusted her again. But I was still the trust protector. That was important for me. And I had Mark add a new clause. I called it the No Parasites Clause. Mark called it Clause 9A, Cohabitation. It stated in no uncertain terms that no one, no spouse, no partner, no friend, no roommate could live in this house for more than 30 consecutive days without my express written consent. Emily read it. She looked at me, a small, knowing smile on her face. "You just can't help yourself, can you, Dad? Always building in a fail-safe." "A good contractor always checks the load-bearing walls," I said. She signed it. "Good," she said. "I like that rule." Mark nodded, shook our hands, and left us to it. Emily and I picked a spot in the backyard, a place with good morning sun, right where Sarah would have wanted it. I dug the hole. My back complained, but it was a good pain. A productive pain. Emily gently loosened the root ball. Together we lifted the tree and settled it into the earth. We shoveled the dirt back in, tamping it down, our hands working together. We stood back. It was just a small, scrawny tree in a big yard, but it was a start. It was alive. I watched Emily get the hose and begin to water it, the spray catching the afternoon sun. I thought about the last 6 months, the darkness, the betrayal, the rage, and now this quiet. I had spent my entire life, 70 years, building things. Building houses, building foundations, building a family. I built them with steel and concrete and 2x4s. I built this house with my bare hands, thinking that wood and drywall could protect my daughter. Thinking that a thing could keep her safe. I was wrong. Houses don't protect people. Walls don't stop the real monsters. The real monsters aren't the ones who break down the door. They're the ones you invite inside. The ones who smile at you while they poison you. The ones who use your love against you. I looked at Emily, her face calm, focused on the small tree. No houses don't protect people. People protect people. That's the job. That's the only job that matters. Emily turned off the water. She looked at the tree, then at me. Her eyes were clear. The fear was gone. "Thank you, Dad," she said, her voice quiet but solid as oak. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Even when I gave up on myself." I nodded. I couldn't speak. I just put my arm around her shoulder and pulled her close. We stood there looking at the house. Our house. "Family isn't something you just give away, honey," I finally said, my voice thick. "It's not a gift. It's a foundation. And sometimes you have to fight to protect it." I squeezed her shoulder. "And William Anderson, he's never lost a fight for what matters." The lesson from William Anderson's story is that love isn't just about giving. Gifting Emily the house almost became a disaster because that kindness wasn't protected. True love demands active protection and foresight. William won not with emotion, but with strategy, the secret cameras, and most importantly, the irrevocable trust. Kindness without strong boundaries becomes an invitation for abusers. Sometimes the toughest, most decisive action is the most loving form of protection. Have you ever had to make a tough decision to protect your family? Do you agree with how William cleaned house? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel.